All right, I have 12 o'clock, so we are going to get started. Welcome everybody to Teacher Tuesday. Our presenter today is Anson Green. I am Krista Mosier. I am with T-Call, and with me helping in the background is Olga, excuse me, Escamilla, Wayne Crandall, and Liz Moya. And at this time, I would like to introduce and welcome Anson Green, our AEL Director for Texas. And I'm going to stop sharing.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Krista. And I want to welcome everybody and give a big thanks to Krista and Liz and Olga, Wayne, over at T-Call for getting us set up once again effortlessly, so we can keep communicating so wonderfully through this difficult time. Hope everybody's doing well. And I'm really excited about this presentation because I love talking to our teachers, and I see some of their directors and coordinators on here too, and I think there's going to be a lot of messaging for everybody. So thank you very much. And then I want to thank Maria Morrow on my team who did the accessibility this morning on what was probably a pretty difficult PowerPoint to do accessibility on, and Lori Slayton, who did such a great job helping us coordinate with T-Call. Today we're going to talk about instruction during the pandemic, and I'm not an instructor right now. I used to be, but saying that, what I want to do is give you some of my observations of what we're seeing out there, and then really hear from you in terms of what you see happening in your local level. So don't be shy on the chat, and start to share your information. And we'll get started here. Trista, can we see my PowerPoint okay?
Yes, sir. See it just fine.
Right. So let's talk about this. And I'm going to walk through kind of several areas just to give you kind of a state perspective. Some of y'all are hardworking teachers out there. You've innovated and figured this all out. You might not think you figured it out, but man, I tell you what, in Texas, we have done a great job. But we're going to talk about how we're doing as a state. Then we're going to look at the future of adult education and literacy during the pandemic in terms of what I'm forecasting will be some things to pay attention to. And then talk about instruction and give you some of my observations about what I see happening. And then hopefully hear from you also about things that you're finding out in your areas that are effective. And then we'll end by talking about having a plan for moving forward and all those great things. Let me move on to the next slide, and we'll talk about how we're doing as a state. And I want to say I think we're doing great. These are some numbers I want to share with you of enrollments. And I'll give you some context here. We have some states in the United States where they just shut down completely in March, and there were no services because many states don't have any kind of digital literacy or distance education kind of backbone and culture that we have in Texas. So a lot of my peers were like, man, we can't do anything till we open up. And they're trying to figure out and build a foundation of distance education. We've been wonderfully positioned for a long time. We've got, all our grantees are required to do distance education. We have all kinds of distance education and distance digital literacy expertise out there, PD training, and lots of staff that really figure this out quickly. So we were able to really turn around very, very quickly and get things up and running. And so you see in the first year there, this year, I broke this up so you can see this year and then next year. Last year, 2018 and 2019. And so you can see our enrollment was very close in both years in March. Now this is March, so this is going to be prior to spring break, prior to the pandemic, prior to all these things happening. We all go on spring break and boom, all of a sudden our lives have changed personally and our situations at work have changed. And so you see last year, we had a little bit of attrition from March to April, And then this year, yeah, we had a lot more attrition. We go from 31,000, almost 32,000 to 19,000. But if you ask me, that's 19,000 that we transitioned to remote. And this is just April, remote and transitioned into, and that we're already doing distance learning. So that's a lot of students. And that is the first month really where we had to figure this out. We don't have finals on the May numbers, but I'm sure it's very encouraging. Now, I always look at this and I say, well, this is also getting towards the end of semester, end of a traditional time when students come to class. So we're going to see these things go down and down and down. I see a question in the chat about the program years. So our program years would be 18, 19. So it begins with 18. So PY 18 is 18, 19. And then PY 19 is 19, 20. So that's this year. I also wanted to point out, we had already brought in April, 263 new students. So these are students that never darkened the door of one of your classes, never saw you in person necessarily. And they brought in, and we're bringing in a lot more new students as we progress. We've got them going on in IET. This is a completion ceremony for IET. These are students in Wharton Junior College in early childhood, computer science, level 1 technology, medical assistant, phlebotomy, pharmacy tech, and CNA. So we're keeping the training going, and we had 43% of IETs continue through the pandemic so far. So that is really a testament because, you know, so much IET requires a lot of hands-on. So people really had to dig deep to get that kind of transition. So let's talk about the future here real quick. And this is where things really get exciting, could be scary, and at the underscoring of all this is it's very tragic. So this is the unemployment claims for Texas. And these are as of March. So this is a long time back. Now we have quite a bit more people unemployed, and we have a tremendous amount of effort being put in that. The estimates are about 20% of the workforce is unemployed right now. We've opened up call centers. We answer about 1,000 calls. We have 1,000 people answering calls. And we even purchased from 5 to 20 servers just to handle unemployment insurance. But you can see, compared to the Great Recession that some of us remember, that was a long, drawn out climb to a much smaller number of claims. Here, overnight, essentially, the United States and Texas here go into a pretty depressing unemployment situation. Some of y'all have had this occur, maybe to yourselves, to family members, to friends. I think everybody knows somebody impacted by unemployment, with 20% of the state workforce unemployed. But ways we can look at that are, if you know anything about unemployment, people need something to do. They want to get reskilled. They want to get back into the workforce, and this is a good time for them to do it. So when I look at these 3 million claims, and this is in March, got a lot more now, thinking this is huge potential for new students, and these will be new students coming in. People need to get a GED or high sets. They need to be able to be competitive now that the markets are opening and certain businesses are opening. They want to be top of the heap in terms of skills to be able to get back into the workforce. Those that previously, back in February and January, were limited English and had good jobs, now maybe much less employable because there's going to be 1,000 people with better English skills or better skills in general in front of them for the job. So it's going to be a very tough labor market, but it's also a very fortuitous place for us to offer a service that can really bring enrichment and hope for individuals who are unemployed. So keep that in mind. And that's the context of this, is there's a wave of students coming. They're coming already. So when we think about distance education and how do we get online, one of the problems we have is that when the public heard schools closed, K-12 is closed, college is closed, they assumed everything was closed. and they assumed AEL was closed. But you saw by those numbers, we were not closed. We were open for business. So we've got to really help market what we're doing to our folks out in our communities. We've got guidance on how to bring new students in at the TCAL website. So this serving new students at a distance, I've talked to a lot of the directors about this for quite a bit now, but that's where we are. There's a lot of FAQs and information on serving students at a distance, and it's really a whole different climate for us. Now, the old days are over. We can't be doing any kind of intakes like this anymore, right? And we've got to figure out, how do we recruit, how do we enroll, place students, and assess them all at the same time. And y'all are doing that right now. I'm somewhat preaching to the choir, but I'm thinking too, you're instructors, you may not see the big picture, you might not see everything going on the backstory of your organization, or you may be very apprised of it. But we've kind of been talking about these steps to accept new students and bring new students into instruction. First, it's all about planning. Everybody needs to work on this together through these phases of recruitment, intake, determining eligibility, and then collecting the data. But that recruitment piece is critical for us. The message has got to be, we're open for business, because we are. And we want to, during the summer and fall, address those millions of Texans that are unemployed that need our services, because they are probably making assumptions. Hey, I can't get my GED right now because school's closed. I can't go to my ESL class, or I can't find an ESL class because it's closed. And we all know that's not the case. So one of the messages to instructors is, you're probably doing this already and your students are, but make sure that your students know how to, what to tell their friends and family members that might need our services to do in terms of enrolling, because it's so critical for us. Our schools have just done a great job of opening their websites. Here's Amarillo, ACC. ACC's got good chats for instructors and students to leave messages and be in contact. Here's Houston Community College. Good messaging. So I've been telling your bosses, the directors out there, get your websites organized. Here's a Facebook page out there at Howard College, and really get in touch with messaging very well to the public. Even rural area providers, much smaller provider here in Region 9 Service Center out there in Wichita Falls, they got their webpage updated. So we've got a message, because when we find students, we got to be able to say, go here and enroll. There'll be somebody that'll be in contact with you. They'll do it through chat, but let your students carry that message, because a lot of the public assumes we are not open for business. So how do we prepare? Well, we're all out there online, and this really gets us into this discussion of how do we really do this in a logical manner? And I want to see you in the chat on thinking about instructional arrangements. So think right now, this is the old days. Yeah, we could do a class with 25, 28, 30 students and be the guide on the side, or the sage on the stage, providing instruction. But that all ended after spring break, and we had to go into a different way of doing things. And our first model was really just transition that brick and mortar class to an online class. But as we've been going through, we've started to say, hey, this is really a different model entirely. We've got to really think about how to do this effectively, efficiently. If you were a teacher out there and your supervisor came in and said, here's a Zoom ID, go in there, start your class, outreach to the students. You guys figured that out, many of you, because we didn't have expertise in making a pivot like that. We had folks that had good ideas, and that's what saved us. But many of you figured it out on your own. And you did a great job of voicing to your supervisors, and it got back to me about what the constraints were and what were the things that were that you were trying to figure out. And I was asking these questions because I wanted to know, like, what does this new model look like, and how can we be more effective? So as you listen now, reflect on what you're doing, put some ideas in the chat, don't be shy, and for sure, think about positioning for the summer, positioning for the fall. How could we get together and talk with our supervisors and directors and say, hey, let's rethink what we did. We are responding to a fire during this in the spring, and we weren't completely thinking through maybe the best ways to do this because we didn't have any models, but now we do. So I looked at these constraints, and they're on the one hand solutions. They're kind of what we did to solve our problems, but they presented new challenges to us too. And that's where I think we can really start to have an exciting time of thinking through how might we address these things. So, challenges to access. We've got plenty of that out there. Students don't have technology or broadband. Some students don't, some do. Teachers, same boat. That was the first issue we had, was a lot of our instructors did not have sufficient technology at home, or they had one computer and the family now was all having to share it. And they had these constraints, and we've been addressing these things in many ways. We can't fix everything for sure, because at the end of the day, there's a limit to broadband. And at the end of the day, there's a limit to computers, although we've put a lot of guidance out on creating loaner programs for schools and loaning out computers. But one of the things we saw that was somewhat a tragedy, I think, was, when public school ended, because, the third graders and fourth graders and high schoolers, they got some of them loaner laptops from their public schools or iPads or Chromebooks. And as soon as school ended for public school, those things went back to the school districts, and all of a sudden mom or dad lost their computer that they were doing their ESL or GED or high school fluency classes in. So that was rough. But I think now we can see that coming, and I'm really encouraging our providers to think about building out these loaner programs so we can not have that challenge in the future. But, aside from access, we had delivery constraints. And there were constraints that we solved by saying, let's deliver remote instruction any way we can do it. Computer-based, tablet-based, smartphone-based, call up on the phone, regular telephone. And you guys all did that. And it warmed my heart one day to see a class of instructors on Twitter getting posted, and some were using a phone, some were using a PC, some were just calling in, because that showed that instructor was very creative in just saying, hey, whatever you can do to get a message to me, let's do that. So the delivery, we got the word out. We got 20,000 people almost. That continued into April. And but then all of a sudden we said, my God, I've got to manage these different modes of delivery. Computer-based modules are different than tablet-based or smartphone-based. What if they call on the phone? How do I get information to them? So all of a sudden, that was on the instructor to figure out. And then we had, just how do you hear from your students? The streams of communication. Students were chatting through their software systems or chatting on the phone. They were texting, they were emailing, and some were calling in. So as an instructor, I was like, heavens, this is just a handful. And then we had this big debate about synchronous and asynchronous instruction. So that means you're doing things live, or you're making content available that a student can access any time of day, and mixing those up. So these are a lot of variables that 3 months ago, nobody was even thinking about when they thought about instruction. And now we've thrived and survived all that and done a great job at it. But when I think of our instructors, I'm thinking these are the instructors, they're the switchboard operators having to figure this all out. And I just don't think that is the most effective way to manage. So,
Anson,
yes.
there's a few comments that
Good.
I'd like to bring up that goes right along with what you're saying.
Sure.
Somebody said, now online instruction affords the opportunity for more seats in class.
Yep.
And another one says, I like online because when I ask them to write, I can see all responses immediately.
Yeah.
And then Deb Hargrove responded to them with Judy and Jennifer. It allows the quiet learner the opportunity to have their voice heard through chat.
Right. Oh, these are great.
Yes, and then at Literacy Council of Tyler, we are completely changing the entire class schedule for the HSE program. Limited classes will now be offered face-to-face again in July, but online classes will continue to be offered as well. We didn't offer live remote classes previously, but we're finding many students find it more convenient than coming to campus due to restraints like transportation or childcare. And then I like that they can also ask questions and respond privately to me, as well as times when a group discussion. Some can work independently at times, and others I can share a screen or whiteboard and review concepts with them.
Oh, you guys are on it.
And there's a couple more. I would really like to have breakout room on all platforms. As of now, the only one I know who offers this opportunity is Zoom, but its free format has a time limit for the meeting. Just something for the companies need to work on. All right, we're all caught up. Some really, really great ideas here.
Yeah, so listen to that. If you're gathering ideas, this is where I wanted this to go, and you guys just jumped in with great feedback. I was writing it down if you were wondering what I was doing. But I think, and I've been saying this, and at first people thought I was crazy for saying, like, there's like a real jewel of opportunities that we're finding during the pandemic, because we are getting these abilities to reach students that we've never been able to reach, to communicate with them in different ways. I remember initially when we started this, the first things I saw on Twitter and on LinkedIn were ESL classes. And I said, oh my gosh, what's happening here? Because, I mean, we have an intrinsic bias, I think, that, well, ESL is going to be harder to do remote because, they're English language learners and they're going to be more challenged with all the software. And we have these biases. But what I saw was this was a safer place for some students to share. They were being very, very communicative in very low levels of English, because I think there's some comfort in being in your own house and kind of testing yourself and not feeling embarrassed as much. And these whole things of privacy, being able to communicate with your teacher privately, we don't have that in a brick and mortar class. So I appreciate that feedback, and those things should be cherished as real assets and not lost sight of. I see too, you can see from some of the feedback that some of the mechanisms for doing these, to communicating are better than others in terms of private sharing, private chatting, private rooms, those kind of things. So those are decision-making items that the directors and coordinators on the call need to be thinking about in terms of what do we want to invest in. And we've put out quite a bit of money to help our local directors purchase stuff, but buying new licenses for the fall, what would we get? What's the best one for the way our instructors are operating? So I really love that feedback. Thank you so much, and don't hesitate. But
and there's one more that just came in. I would love to be able to offer a hybrid class that is a mixture of live face-to-face and live online, such as offer the face-to-face class online for those who could not make the trip to the classroom. If the instructor was not able to meet face-to-face, the class could still happen via remote learning. This would eliminate the need for subs and keeps the continuity of the instruction.
I love that. Yes, and it's so funny. We're thinking about these very, thank you, Robert. We've been thinking about these very comments as we plan some of our meetings and conferences, is like, can we do these hybrid models? Because I think we're going to enter a place where we will be able to do some on-site work, and whether that's instruction or just assessment, but figuring out a hybrid model, I think, is something that we need to all keep in mind. Now, I want to turn the instruction of, these are just Anson's ideas of some things. So one of the things I noticed is the instructors have now become kind of the production team of an event. And I thought, well, I heard this and I said, well, what does that mean? I heard people saying, well, we're using 2 instructors And I said, well, tell me more about that. And, sometimes it was because one instructor was not savvy enough in using online mechanisms and online services. And the other was, and so they teamed up so that they could all learn. But sometimes they started getting really creative and they really started behaving like a production team. And what I mean by that is I had one instructor basically say, I'll do the instruction. And then somebody else, an instructor, maybe an aide, was acting as kind of the producer. They're dealing with the students' tech needs. I can't get my computer to hook up. I can't find the PowerPoint. They're managing the chat. So if you're doing a remote direct instruction and you've got 30 people all online, there's no way you're going to be able to manage the chat. I'm over here trying to manage this right now, and luckily Krista's helping me out. And then instructional resources. How many times in a class does a student say, what page is that on, or what is that website? Well, now the instructor doesn't have to stop everything and go find it on their hard drive or online, but the producer, quote unquote, person can be taking care of that. So it's a way to kind of scale and take care of this back office work that's got to happen. Because having done these, as your director, it's a production team. For this call, we were on 45 minutes before it started, working on the nuts and bolts, talking things through. And there's a small army back there that I recognized at the beginning that are kind of making sure the wheels don't fly off this thing. So I can just get up here and talk. So that's, no different than what's going to happen in an instructional class. And I think that's one thing we're completely anticipating that there may be higher costs to these classes because you're doubling up instructors and stuff. And that's fine. We're all about spending the money on things that are working. The other divides I've seen are some apps on smartphones are very different than they are on computers. And so when you're trying to do both, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't manage both. So having two instructors, one that's taking the students on their phones and one that's managing the ones on the computers, is just one example of kind of dividing and conquering, as I say here. So we'll take a break for some of the questions here in a second. But I started also thinking, well, now we're talking about some phases. Because, when I taught class, I used to just walk in at, 9 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night, and there was a lot of students ready to go, and we started, Well, now there's like a prep. And if you start right on time, I'm sure you instructors are going, gosh, I spend 15 minutes just sorting out everybody's little unique challenges that they're running up across logging in tonight, or finding the PowerPoint, or finding the chat. So I just thought about this morning. I came up with this. It's probably not inclusive or comprehensive rather, but maybe we break our time with the students into some real clear steps. And you don't have to call them these names. I just call them this for fun. But maybe we be transparent with students and say like, well, the class isn't going to start exactly at 9 or 7 o'clock at night. It's going to start, the actual instruction might start at 9:30 or 9:15. But before, there'll be this kind of corralling the herd, as I say here. And that's really, are people getting connected? How's everybody doing? Saying hi to each other, kind of sharing what happened overnight, and students love to do that. You don't want to cut that off. But you don't have to make that the instructional time immediately, because some students will be sitting there going like, let's get on with learning about order of operations. I don't want to worry about why these 5 people can't connect online. So this corralling the herd would kind of sort people through and really find a way to kind of make sure we're ready to go. Then you might have everybody like making their announcements, like this is what the program's going to say. Our GED test center just opened up. The teachers talk about resources. Their new information on unemployment insurance came out, class. You can go to the website and find it here. So you make some announcements like we typically do in class. And then boom, we go into like, now it's time for instruction. And here you might do your segmenting. So you might say, okay, now we'll go into separate Zoom rooms, and you folks that are working on this lesson, go here, and you folks that are working on this, go here, or the smartphone people, break up with Susanna, and then the folks that are on PCs work with Jose, and you kind of do your instruction, and then maybe you come together and wrap up at the end. Maybe you don't. But I think this is something to kind of say, forget about the brick and mortar. Let's really think through a whole new delivery sequence and tell the students, because doing anything, I just told you we spent 45 minutes before we started this webinar, and those 45 minutes aren't something that you guys all wanted to listen to. So we didn't tell you that the meeting started at 11:20. We told you it started at noon, and you came in at noon. And so that would be the corralling of the herd. And then we started and got going. So you might think of segmenting classes that way. I just was brainstorming, thinking that through. By no means am I saying this is the only way to do it. It's probably not even the best way to do it, but it's a way I thought through it this morning. You guys have better options there because you've really been doing it. Krista, let's hit these questions.
Yes, sir. All right. So just kind of backtracked a little bit. Some more feedback here was ESL for professionals. This is from Luis Martinez. ESL for professionals presented their career plans on Google Meets, video for students and employers to view.
Great.
And Hillary Gould says, I've been wanting that too, Robert, especially with regard to my IET classes, when there's frequently limited time between when they begin and when they need to start their training. So that was talking about that hybrid model. I think the hybrid model will end up being the way many of these classes are delivered, even post-pandemic. Tiffany Lee, during our remote learning at Region 9, we had a facilitator with each instructor on each session.
Excellent.
We're planning on hybrid delivery as well, but we'll have a lot of work to do to make sure all students have access to technology. And that was from David Kloss. Lori Slayton, the buddy teaching system has been awesome for teachers and for students. Claire Gilliam, it's almost impossible to teach a lesson and manage the video conference at the same time.
Amen.
That's for sure. Catherine Parkhurst, yes, the challenge will be on the student end as far as having everything they need to succeed. And I wish we had a facilitator for our classes at HCC. Liz Moya, working with Mac and Apple products creates for interesting troubleshooting as well. Or, and Catherine agrees, or different types of smartphones for using Edmonton or Burlington. Claire Gilliam, I like to have an optional warm-up activity displayed during Corral the Herd so others don't feel like they're wasting time.
Yes.
And Michelle Vick, Claire, I do too. I send them to a breakout room with an activity while I manage the corralling.
Excellent.
And let's see, Tiffany Lee, at the beginning of each session, corral the herd and announcements. We have the facilitator do an instruction slides, Zoom instructions, resources like website for Region 9, T-Call, and unemployment, and had each student type their first and last name and time in the group chat. Sounds kind of like what we do on our T-Call.
Yeah.
Gina Lovelady, my challenge is that my students want to have copies of worksheets and charts. However, they don't have printers or computers. They're not able to write answers to assignments on Zoom. What suggestions might you have?
Excellent. Great question, Gina. And I loved all these comments. I'm going to address some of them. One, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Claire mentioned that, this is something that we may be, really helping us expand our instruction for a longer period. I totally want to say that, we're reaching students, and I've heard multiple stories of people saying, I could never come to class at night, but I can do this. Or rural area students, it's like, I could never drive to class and make it on time every night. It was just too much, but I can log in and get it. So we're expanding our access. I really was thinking about Gina's question, Lovelady, because I've heard examples, and I would encourage everybody to really think about this, but where someone's going to the main office and they're running packets of stuff that could be used on the day's broadcast or the next day's broadcast, leaving them in a place that's socially distanced and safe. But yeah, students like hard copies. I like hard copies. And sometimes it's a way to kind of sit there and maximize the use of maybe one computer at home, because if mom's having to do a lot of instruction online, but she could do the same kind of stuff in a packet, she can free up that laptop for some other members of the family. And I just love that idea. So you guys have figured this out. If you're not aware of some of these things, make sure you're taking good notes, because I'm learning a lot here. And for sure, I love the comments of how you're kind of corralling the herd and making the announcements up front. Tiffany Lee's on here. She's one of our experts. It's always out there posting on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you, Tiffany. But yeah, lots of great ideas of how to do this. I loved Lewis's idea of bringing in employers and saying, hey, we're not going to stop this engagement with employers. And employers are stuck at home too. Let's kind of work together and showcase our foreign trained professionals with employer engagement. So just love these ideas. So as we move through, and I didn't even think about the PC and the Mac that Liz, my gosh, you're dealing with, dozen or more different possibilities, really more than that. And the instructor out there can't expect to be a genius on all those platforms. But if I was a director, I'd be saying, okay, well, what do we need to do? Do we need to put all the Mac people in one room and all the cell phone people in another? Do we need to buy a Mac if we don't know anything about a Mac? Because if they're radically different, someone's got to learn how to use one. So these are things like I think that are very, very useful. Teresa Johnson just asked about, could they get a copy of this chat? Krista, you might want to share with us how that's possible. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to the next slide here.
Okay.
Close to the end here. And really we can just kind of open it up from there. But so I'm sending you all a charge right now on June 9th. It's time to plan for the summer. You've probably already done that, but for the fall, because we're going to get a lot more students. You're probably feeling at capacity. Take a vacation or something if you need to, because with that much unemployment, we're going to really see a lot of students coming our way. But think about this plan. Communicate with your director there. Use your experience. No one's an expert on this except you. And these people on this chat and the people that have been posting on Twitter and LinkedIn all during this period, the webinars that we've had over and over and over with instructors out there. We're a national leader. And use that experience, capitalize it. People have figured out amazing things in 3 months. Talk to others, network, get into the PD portal and get into the different chats and discussion groups, and share. And then review objectively, do some reflection with your peers at your organization. What worked? What didn't work? For us, for you, the instructors, and then for the students. And build based on those constraints, because you all suffered through them tremendously. Take advantage of the flexibility. TWC, we're giving you as much flexibility as we can think of, because we really want to give you the latitude to be creative, and then make sure everybody in your community knows you're open for business, because so many people are sitting at home. Who would want an English language learner or someone without a GED or high school diploma to languish at home and think that there's nothing that can be done and they're unemployed? That is a dark place to be. We can be a beacon of hope and enrichment and support, because we're open for business and we're doing great. So let's talk about how to get this chat. I see some of the chats coming in there about that. Krista, you want to share this?
We're just kind of troubleshooting. This is something that's kind of new. Tracy Carter mentioned that if you look in the chat pod where you have the 2 and everyone and go all the way over to the right, there's 3 dots. But we're trying to see if everybody has this or not. If you click on the three dots, it's there. The very thing says save chat.
Now,
And so,
Krista's starting to feel like an instructor, and saying, "I
yes.
don't know how to find this. I'm using a Mac." This is what I'm talking about. But let's see if we can figure this out.
Right. Okay. It looks like everybody's saying yes. There's a few people saying no.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems that we have as TCall to make it accessible is that it's not going to be an accessible document. So
Yep.
I'm not sure we can put the whole chat on, but something that Olga mentioned is that we can pull the information that I can go through the chat and pull these comments and put them in the instructor's COP on the portal.
Yeah, I love that idea because there's like 3/4 of this people don't want to read. It's just little comments, but there's a lot of rich stuff in here too. And I bet you these constraints about finding the chat have to do with if you're on a phone or if you're
exactly. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So
it's all that troubleshooting.
let's see questions on what we've been talking about. Any parting words that people want to share about things that have worked well for them, and what you need. I mean, you're talking to the state director here. I'll help you out if I know what we need to do. We've been going to our commissioners and asking for things, money in particular, to give out to the grantees. But I can't ask if I don't know what is needed. So make sure you're communicating that well to your bosses so we can help you out.
Okay.
Anson?
Yes.
We do have a question backed up a little bit from Margie DeLaurel, who wants to know regarding your recommendation on starting class at a separate time.
Yeah.
She said, starting class on time, aren't we setting a poor example for workplace by not starting on time? Yeah, I think maybe she didn't understand what you were proposing.
Yeah. So here's what, that's great, Margie. I'm glad you brought this up. I'm saying, let me go back to this slide. I'm saying, yeah, you start class on time, but the class instruction starts at the instruction point. So you start maybe the corral, the herd, and the announcements at 9 in the morning, and then at 9:15 you start the instructions. Or you could start the corral and the announcements at 8:45 and tell everybody, be very transparent. So like, we're going to deal with everybody logging on at 8:45, but the class starts at 9. So it's not about like setting a bad precedent in terms of work ethic. It's about us as professionals setting a good model for when does instruction start, because instruction doesn't start at corralling the herd or maybe the announcements. It starts when instruction starts. So it's about that. It's about how you message it too. I think it's very important. Good comments. I appreciate that, Margie.
Okay. Just a couple more ideas that I thought I'd mention is we'd like to use some free online polling resources to have participants create interesting word clouds to look at as the group gathers. We use Mentimeter and Slido as they are free.
Yep.
Padlet is an option for students to write answers in class, a joint activity. GoFormative.com is a site where you can make a digital worksheet. Liz says one idea is to give your students annotation privileges on Zoom, and they can write on whatever you share on your screen.
Oh.
I've asked students to write answers into the chat. It's very basic, but it allows them to participate. You might find that a document camera helps. You write the information or share a worksheet that way, and they can copy down the work you do and then read back answers or snapshot what they have and email it to you from their phones.
Yeah, I see some of these comments. One from Deanne Ellis out there. They open the class 20 or 30 minutes early, and then they start at 5:30. So there you go. Great model of kind of corralling the herd, getting this together before you actually put that quality time in. And what I was going to say about that too is opening 20 or 30 minutes early doesn't have to be the instructor. That could be the production team that comes on And much like we did here, I didn't have to come on early. I did, but I could have come on at 12 o'clock and started this thing, and probably everybody at Kiko would have been panicking. That could have happened. But it's a way to, maybe you want to find some economy in the instructor's time, or the instructor maybe says, hey, I need some time to prep a little bit here before we get started. Can you take care of signing these people up and making sure everybody's logged in? Love these ideas coming out. I wanted to mention the polling question. I can't remember who posted that, but we've all used those polls. There's a lot of them out there. I've used Slido and some of the other ones. And that's a good way to check comprehension, because again, it can be somewhat anonymous. It can be completely anonymous, but maybe the teacher tells 32 people that are in this Zoom room, like, does everybody understand how to find the common denominator? Well, Anson's not going to want to raise his hand because he forgot, or he's not going to want to put it in the chat. Could you go over one more time? But with a poll, I could say, I didn't get it. And the instructor go, man, 18 people in this room don't understand how to find the common denominator. Let me review this again, or let me tell them, basically, let's cover that separately. We don't want to slow everybody else down, but we heard you, and sign up and we'll do a separate Zoom room on common denominator. I'm just thinking here. So those are great ideas. I appreciate the information y'all are sharing. There's some comments on loaner programs. If you're a director out there or something, I've got a lot of examples of loaner policies. I collected them from a lot of other programs recently. So if you don't have a loaner program, most colleges will have these, and the school districts figured them out when they were having to take the K-12 students online. But I'd be very happy to share those, so you can kind of see, what that's all about. And I've heard some people saying, well, we've got a bunch of laptops, but we don't want to necessarily loan those out. So we bought a lot more lower cost and easier to use Chromebooks, for example. Because the problem with loaning out laptops sometimes is you've got to be really good at Windows or whatever to figure out how to use a laptop, whereas some of these other devices, you just plug and play and they start working. Other questions coming in? We're kind of wrapping up here.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments just on people helping each other with, there's one comment about, I've heard about providing copies of worksheets, which I was doing. However, I took a webinar on copyright laws, and many of the resources I use have pretty restrictive are in their copyright verbiage.
Well, look at that, because sometimes there are provisions for educational use, and depending on how big the group is that you're sharing the information with. If it's a very small group, I think there's waivers for that. Good, yeah. Though, for sure. I'm glad somebody's looking at the law there. Anything else coming in before you leave the session? Okay, so Olga, tell us, make sure we put your name in.
Right.
It looks pretty good out there for sure.
Yes.
See that the presentation will be available in the PD portal in about 4 weeks. So that's exciting.
Correct. And like we had talked about, I will take the chat. If you were not able to save it, I will take the chat and have it posted in the COP for instruction. AEL instructors, I think is the name of it, and get it, with all those ideas, because they are definitely great ideas. Okay,
well, I think I'm wrapped up here. I really appreciate everybody's feedback. This has been really, I've learned a lot. We've got 130 people on here, so it seemed very exciting for folks. I'm glad it's recorded. And communicate, begin that planning. You guys can bring a lot of hope to your community. The underskilled are getting particularly hurt in this recession because they are often the first fired or laid off, or they work in industries that have been really hard hit. And we don't want people to think there's no hope for them until there's a cure for COVID-19. there's a lot of hope going on in our adult education programs out there, and it's due to you guys. So that's it for me. I appreciate it. This has been wonderful, and I can't wait to see you guys again.